Hey, what's up, everybody? Ethan Daly here from the GigRoots podcast. I'm your host for incredible interviews with inspirational people from all across America. On this show, we tell real stories that don't shy away from the challenges of moving from marginalized to mainstream. Each episode, we speak with the people who are diligently working toward community transformation at the grassroots level. Let's go. During this episode, we're in Flint, Michigan. It's situated about an hour outside of Detroit, the Motor City. We all know about the economic downturn of the automotive industry that hit D-Town especially hard. And by extension, Flint saw its primary labor force decrease by as much as 1/10 over a stretch of roughly 4 decades. But within the last 20 years, the city has been attempting a bounce back, only to have been hit by a continuous string of financial hardships, along with strains placed on local government to enhance the city's failing infrastructure. So now the city's roughly 100,000 residents continue pushing forward. Teresa Lucas is one such resident just outside the metro area in the town of Grand Blanc. Her business is Life Without Limits, a social enrichment program that helps train children with autism to function within traditional educational and social environments. For families coping with autism, that is certainly enough of a challenge, only to be compounded by the ongoing pandemic, and Teresa's own experience raising a child with autism informs her approach to supporting families during these trying times. Naturally, anything on top of the stress of COVID-19 tends to place parents on edge and push families to the breaking point. All right. So, Teresa, how are you doing today?
I am well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. You're coming to us from Flint, Michigan. That's my understanding, right?
Well, I serve communities in Flint, but I live in Grand Blanc.
Okay. So when you say you serve communities, what the word is that your business is called Life Without Limits. Talk to me about that. What is that?
Okay, so Life Without Limits is a social enrichment program that I founded when I noted that students of mine and my children who are on the autism spectrum as well struggled with being able to transfer skills learned in therapy into everyday life. So for an example, like my son had been in therapy for years, but he continued to struggle socially. So it didn't matter how much therapy he had, when he was put in real world situations, he wasn't able to navigate those using the strategies taught to him in therapy. And so I thought that I would provide programs where I kind of filled in that gap where they continue to have therapy, but then I provided a space for them to practice those skill sets.
Now, I heard you say the phrase on the spectrum, which I think I know what you mean by that, but just could you kind of explain that a little bit more? Because I think a lot of people might have some thoughts about what exactly that means. So just give us some clarification.
Okay, so on the spectrum, I am a person who doesn't necessarily like labels unless it provides supports to individuals. But for your audience's sake, autism is basically what some of us say. We say on the spectrum autism. So it is a social disorder. It impacts the way a person is able to interact with others. Sometimes it impacts speech, and some sensory related challenges are accompanied with that as well.
Okay. And your kids are how old?
I have an 18-year-old who is going off to college and
Congratulations.
an 8-year-old.
You said an 18-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Yes.
All right. So that's a big gap right there. And what's family life been like for you guys lately?
You know, it has been really difficult
Sure.
to manage, especially like being able to be in a mental space. Given our current circumstances, you have COVID and then you have therapy not being available because of COVID. And so just having to watch some of the regression in your child is difficult. And then trying to manage some of the stress that comes with managing losing people that he knows, that I know, to this virus, and also managing some of his behaviors and sensory related challenges. And so we're finally coming to a point where everything is okay, but it's just okay. It's not great, you know?
Right.
So
It's sustainable for now, but not for long.
Right, because now we're moving back into school, so that presents another set of challenges, you know?
Yeah, this is going to be a big thing for, I mean, it affects us too. So my wife and I, I'll just mention I have a 5-year-old that has some speech issues. And so we're asking ourselves the same question. And we're noting similarly some of the things that you described with your son. Of course, our son is 5, you have an 18-year-old and an 8-year-old. How are your kids making sense of this time right now?
Like my youngest child, he is oblivious. Like he it just needs his needs met, and he's fine. Um, I think we're more stressed out in terms of like not receiving some of the speech related therapy and OT and things like that. So we've been trying to fill in those gaps. And then my older son, he has some reservations about living on campus now, because he's an avid reader. So he's always reading about what is happening around him, and he has questions about that. And so there's some anxiety there for him. But like I said, overall, we do pretty well with putting out fires and managing some of the challenges. But I think we're all like on a heightened level of stress right now. Just all of us, we just try not to talk about it as much because that makes us all more stressed. But I think they're doing okay though.
Yeah. What's your mechanism for maintaining equilibrium in your household? How do you keep things calm?
You know, it's difficult. I mean, some days certain things work, but what I try to do is limit how much time we are exposed to the media. We have a certain time when we talk about concerns related to the virus and how we are to protect ourselves when we leave home and things like that, but we don't allow that to consume us. And so we play a lot of board games because that helps Mason with my little son, 8-year-old is Mason. And so we try to engage him as much as we can to kind of give him the social support that he needs. And so we play video games, we play board games, we even do karaoke to kind of help with speech. And so we just try to be creative to kind of hit some of those therapy pieces that Mason isn't, getting right now. And that kind of helps us to kind of keep calm and just kind of have some fun and enjoy family time while we can.
What sort
Uh,
of games does you like to play?
ooh. So we play Uno a lot. Video games or board games?
I mean, either one.
A favorite is Don't Wake Dad is Mason's favorite. Uh, Connect Four, Apples and Apples is
That's a good one.
one. So we just try to play games where Mason can participate too. And my oldest is just free spirit. He'll just go with the flow. So he plays any games that we want to play. He loves Scrabble though, and he loves Uno too. But for the most part, he's not a big game player. He's a reader, my oldest son. So
Mm.
that's how we engage him too, because he is usually in his own world reading something, and he'll share what he's reading. But that really alienates Mason. So we try to do things that includes all of us.
Teresa, as you're talking about just some of your parenting strategies and techniques and ways that you're trying to be aware of the differences in your children and how to meet their needs specifically. Yeah, I imagine that all of those things inform the way that you think about life without limits in your business. What are your conversations like right now with other families, whether you serve them or not, just with other families who are maybe struggling through this time?
Oh, this is a difficult time. I notice a lot of parents are having more mental challenges in terms of kind of keeping themselves regulated. And I try to always tell parents, like, it's difficult to de-escalate a child when you're escalated. And so I think, with everything that is happening around us in terms of politics, in terms of the virus, parents are a lot more short, the parents that I've been working with specifically. And so what I've done, we try to do support groups. We have Zoom sessions when parents are having some difficulty. And that has been helping parents to kind of talk through some of the challenges that they're having in terms of regulating some behaviors that are difficult. A lot of us are not having access to therapy, whether therapy sessions are closed or we've chosen to keep our kids at home. It has been a challenge to figure out strategies to help regulate some of these behaviors our kids display. And so this is, in my opinion, I have told parents, even for myself, this has been a good opportunity for us to figure out what therapists are doing and then try to implement those things ourselves. Because I think a lot of times we go to therapies and, they are working with our kids and we're hands off because don't want to feel like we're intruding or we're disturbing the session in any way. But then situations like this have definitely caused me to take a step back and say, hey, I needed to be more involved. So in the event therapy is not available, then I know what pieces to put in place. And so we've been talking about that, some strategies that we can improve upon when working with our kids, reaching out to those OT therapists and getting strategies for self-regulation. I also have a certified behavior analyst who consults with me, and she has done some lives with our support groups, and that has helped some because we can't, address any specific behaviors without having observed them. So we try to give some helpful pieces for parents and to address some of the concerns they're having. But basically, it's just putting a Band-Aid on a wound, but we're just doing what we can at the moment.
When you talk to parents and if you make a suggestion about therapy, what sort of responses that get usually?
Responses about which part? I'm sorry.
About getting therapy. I mean, or whether you're recommending perhaps this as a mechanism for the parents.
I think everything has its place. I am not one to say what I think will or won't work for a child. I say, if you believe you've done your due diligence and you've done the research and you believe this is something that can benefit your child, go for it. Because I know for my oldest son, I did speech therapy and I pushed speech therapy, but then I noticed some social pieces that were missing too. And I didn't opt for like social work and OT and things like that for him.
Oh, certainly, certainly. Yeah, maybe I misunderstood as well what you were saying, Teresa. But I think what I think I heard you said was talking about the parents specifically that are trying to cope and trying to deal with things during this time, and whether or not some sort of therapeutic intervention could be of help to them.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, and that is true too, but like right now especially in our area, not a lot of therapists are open or offering services. And so we are just trying to have them contact them, maybe call them, and then talk a little bit about the plan that they had in place prior to COVID and try to implement some of those pieces. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you were
No,
saying.
no, that's okay. What it kind of begs this other question really is sort of behind that is we talk about there's sometimes a stigma associated with issues with mental health. Have you found
Mhm.
that within your context in some of these conversations that stigma still exists, or is it changing perhaps because of the current environment right now?
I think the stigma still exists. I think people are less apt to admit they have challenges with self-regulation and managing depression and sadness, especially in this moment. So I think it is still a very real thing. I think, like right now, people like to talk about how they're feeling without the label of saying, okay, this is mental illness, or this is depression, or this is whatever it is. They'll just say, well, I feel really sad, or I'm disappointed because, and we are less apt to call a thing, if that makes sense. And so I think that is what prevents a lot of moms from getting the support they really need and from reaching out. Some of it is embarrassment. Some of it is not wanting to acknowledge that you're having a difficult time because everyone
Labels are scary, right?
yeah, it's scary. And I mean, and then too, like just the judgment sometimes that you feel. I'm not saying that this happens in my support groups, but I've seen parents be vilified when they said, "Oh, this is difficult," or his behaviors are difficult, or she is difficult to manage. I'm not happy about this, and I try to say to myself, it's okay to be true to yourself and say, this is hard. Autism is difficult. It's unpredictable. It's okay to say, I can't do this in this moment. And I don't think a lot of parents, mothers, fathers have found a space where they feel okay doing that.
It sounds like in some ways you've pointed to this a couple of different times where all of the interventions right now are just kind of a temporary measure. It's like
Yeah.
putting a Band-Aid on it, you said. But what are you hoping for moving forward in the future, even in the midst of kind of all this uncertainty? What are you telling parents to hope for, and how are you managing their expectations?
I am hoping that parents are more involved in the therapies that their children receive. And so that if there's any interruption, we are able to continue on with those services without the need for hand over hand support from therapists. I am also hoping for more awareness and support for families who have had to manage a child's disabilities, lack of therapy, and their own mental health during a crisis. So putting support pieces in place for specifically for families who have children with disabilities. Because I mean, there's a lot of information out there that provides support to families, well, not necessarily families, to individuals who are suicidal or who are depressed. But I rarely ever see interventions or supports put in place specifically for families who have to manage difficult behaviors from children or who have disabilities. I mean, I think that just adds another layer to what everyone else is already dealing with. And we don't have a clear space. There's not a lot of acknowledgement around parents who are dealing with kids who have autism, who are not getting services, who are accustomed to certain schedules and that schedule has been disrupted, who are accustomed to having some sort of social interaction and now they're not getting any of it. And so all of those pieces, it just has a profound impact on your mental well-being as a parent, because on the one hand, you want to keep them safe. And then on the other hand, it's like they need all of these pieces that are not currently available. And how do I balance that? Like,
So you obviously have your personal experience in dealing with this, which gives you some extra tools to be able to relate and to empathize with what other families are going through. Talk
right.
about how that informs your business strategy, if you would. Just how does that play into life without limits?
Okay, so like I alluded to this before too, like something that I noticed in my own child was like he's in therapy, but just not being able to fully navigate social situations appropriately, even with therapy. So he's taught phrases to use, he's taught how to engage others and things like that. But what happens in a real world situation is that those skills are not transferred over. And so I'm able to observe this in my own child as a parent. Like when I take him to play groups and things like that, a lot of times children who don't have disabilities or not affiliated with anyone who has them aren't taught how to engage kids who have disabilities. And so I find they are less patient. And then that causes him frustration because he doesn't understand why they don't want to play with him. And so just being able to navigate those pieces successfully in real time. You know what I'm saying? So then I can provide correction and help the child who is not disabled. You know what I'm saying? Who is neurotypically developing, if that's more appropriate. And so I noticed it in my own child, and then I noticed it as a special ed teacher too. Like I noticed in the school system, specifically, there isn't a concerted effort to address social challenges. I mean, that it just what is what it is, you know. And so I am a person who is all around, and so I'm always watching how kids engage with each other. And I don't know if
Why do you think that is, Teresa? When you said that there's not a focused or concerted effort on dealing with social issues, why do you think that is?
I think time. I mean, just realistically, how schools are set up, the focus is on academics. I mean, as a parent with a child with autism, I feel like social skills and being able to communicate is at the top of the top, you know. But in the education system, how are they performing on assessments? How are they performing academically? Takes precedence over those skills that they need to be independent. You know what I'm saying? So
Right,
I
right.
think, and I think that makes me I think that's what makes me so impactful in special ed. Because I try to factor those things into my teaching too. I provide opportunities for them to practice those social skills in my teaching. But back to what I was saying, some of my observations, like a lot of my students, I can't say much about that, but struggle with maintaining friendships and establishing those friendships because of the lack of social skills and the lack of opportunity to practice those skills. And so I just kind of feel like there needed to be a space, something that filled the gap between school and therapy to kind of blend those together, and there wasn't anything. They were just always, okay, here's therapy, here's school, but then nowhere to practice that. And so I felt like Life Without Limits could provide those opportunities. And then I noted once I started the business itself, more parents were concerned with a violation of their child's rights. So then I added the advocacy piece in there. Since I write IEPs, I read IEPs. I mean, I'm a special ed teacher, so who better to provide some support to families who had some questions and some concerns about their child's rights. So I added that piece in. And then you had other parents who were concerned that their children weren't making growth. And I share videos of what Mason is able to do and his growth over time. And so I had families interested in tutoring. And so I wanted to provide that opportunity as well. So we're gradually expanding. I
Does
found,
Mason like being in front of the camera?
uh,
Some
not
days
really.
better than others, right?
Yeah, not really.
But
You
it's a
know,
tool to it's right. It's helpful for other parents to see. I hear what you're saying there. Yeah.
yeah.
So I want to switch gears just a little bit there to kind of talk more about your process of having started Life Without Limits and what the local environment, like what sort of support have you received within your community to help launch that and to maybe help it continue to grow, or what support are you currently receiving?
I know Flint Soup has given me a lot of support. They kind of let me know when there's funding opportunities available. They kind of give me pointers here and there when I need them. So they've been a great support. Um, the Sylvester Broom Empowerment Village has allowed me to use their facility to host some of my groups there. And so they've been really supportive and they see my vision. Um, but other than that, I have found that a lot of people are not open to providing services that aren't therapy. Um,
What does that mean?
just like I have always called my program enrichment. So to kind of stay away from therapy because I think both have their place. And so I've tried to reach out to a few business owners that provide speech and OT and things like that to just kind of pitch my idea in terms of how beneficial it could be to have a space where they can practice skills learned in therapy. And they seem like they're open to the idea, but there's not a lot of support or I don't get any support at all
Mm,
from
mm.
those communities that offer support to families with autism. And so, and like what I'm trying to offer is not necessarily the same as what they're offering. I'm not offering therapy. I'm offering opportunities to be independent, to practice social skills, to be communicative, and things like that, and which are life skills, basically. And I've not found a lot of people that were open to that. And so,
It sounds like something's getting lost in the message. Is that
yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah, I believe so. I mean, I can't be sure because when I have conversations with them, they're open, they like the idea, but there's rarely any follow up. And so I don't know, perhaps it may be like a competition kind of thing because I know a lot of people are moving away from the labels and they're more looking at neurodiversity as opposed to autism and LD and ADHD and things like that. So they're taking away those labels. So a program like mine would meet the very diverse needs of diverse learners. So that could be very competitive. And so, uh,
You
in
know,
my mind,
right, right.
but
We didn't really touch on this yet either, but yeah, I'm just wondering for you as a woman of color as well, like how many other folks that look like you or that come from your backgrounds are offering similar type of services, or are there any?
there are not any. And I was surprised by that. Not many, not any that I'm aware of. I am the first one to offer this. And again, like I think in our community, not everyone, I'll say that, but for the mass majority of us, there has always been this, um, I don't know how to say this appropriately, this mindset to not acknowledge the disability per se. So I feel that a lot of women of color are more reluctant to kind of move into a position like the one that I'm taking. I mean, even I was brought up in the same way to not acknowledge
To not acknowledge it.
or mental illness or have conversations about that. And, even when I brought up the fact that I thought my son was, there was a little pushback, like, no, don't say that. Don't, that's not what that is. That's not what he has. You don't know what that is. He's fine. It just takes some time. So there was like this reluctance to admit that there was a challenge there. And I think culturally speaking, that is so. So I don't get a lot of support in this particular area from women that look like me. And there are not a lot of centers that offer this kind of support. Is my experience.
Well, your son is 8 years old now, and I mean, you've had these conversations with members of your family. How have they come to accept it at this point in time? I mean, what was that process like? Because I imagine that based on your description, it seems like if they weren't unwilling to acknowledge at a certain point,
Mm.
how does that look now?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think now there is a lot of, love and acceptance now, but it's a
Certainly.
process, and I'll be honest, like even when I first heard it and I was an educator, just, hearing the words, just acknowledging that this child that I planned was going to have so much difficulty. I've just now gotten to a place where I can openly say it, and so and that's just my truth, like
Mhm.
it's been a journey, and the same is true for my family as well, but they are just like super loving and super accepting. They just didn't want me to put the label on them. Like I said, that's cultural in itself.
Right.
They didn't want the label. They were like, okay, well, yeah, he's not necessarily doing that right now, but it'll take time. And so if I had operated from that mindset, I may not have gotten the therapy and the support that he needed in that moment.
Did you internalize that as a parent or as a mother at all, as if it was somehow a reflection on you? Did that at all play into perhaps your reluctancy to accept sort of this is what your son was dealing with?
Um, I think like when you have a child, you have this perception of how and who and what they'll be. And I think just anything outside of that is like, oh, well, it's different. Not that it's bad, but it's different from what I anticipated. And so there was some sadness because, like, I'm an educator, so I'm constantly watching kids grow and develop and acquire all these skills in real time. And it's like, oh, that's amazing. I can't wait for Mason to do that. And then just having reality sit in after doing the research and things like that and hearing, you know, these therapists tell you what he'll never be able to do and how he'll never be able to accomplish A, B, and C. And so, yeah, you internalize that like, okay, he's two. What didn't I do? Even though I knew the research, I know there's no known cause for autism. I know this, right? Professionally speaking, I could tell any parent this. But
Right.
as a mother, I mean, you're in your emotional state, brain states, you can't think clearly. All you're thinking about is my child is going to struggle with this. And how do I help that? And what role did I play? Was it something that I ate? Or did I not take care of myself well enough to, even though I know,
Well, you
and
can't help but ask yourself those questions, right?
yeah, like what didn't I do? And then you get to a point where, okay, the knowledge, the information is power, sinks in, and you're like, okay, enough grieving, enough sadness. What do we do to get him to be to reach his full potential? And so it was operating in that mindset, like, okay, what do we need to do to address this piece? All right, we fixed that. What do we need to do to address this piece? And then just go from there. And then after a while, I was able to accept the fact that some of these doctors are wrong, because I was told that my son wouldn't talk. And he's a reader, my 8-year-old. He's a reader. he talks, he's functional. You know what I'm saying? But I was told he would never do that. And I think accepting the fact that doctors have their guesses about what he can do, and then God will show up and turn all that upside down. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but I think that just kind of helped me to accept this better and know that if I focus on those individual weaknesses, that I can help him reach those goals, you know, those realistic milestones they said he would never achieve. And he's doing that. And so accepting that he's autistic, but also accepting that I can do something about it has helped me to move forward. If
That
that
really
answers
helps.
your question.
Absolutely. It really helps me get a better understanding of why you call it life without limits.
Yep.
You are imagining the best possible for your children, not just your children, but those whom you serve.
Yeah, because I mean, and if I'm being completely honest, it's just like, and I'm not saying everybody, I'm just saying in my experience, like people like to paint them in a box. These therapists paint them in the box. Sometimes these educators paint them in a box, and they'll say, okay, your son qualified. He has this score of 69 ... So he won't be able to achieve these things. And if you're not a parent who does the research, or you rely heavily on what these doctors say, then you're more apt to believe like they believe and leave these kids in a box. And so we just have to get to a point where we challenge everything that they say. I mean, because ultimately what we believe is what matters, because we're the ones that's constantly there pushing and encouraging and supporting and providing therapy and whatever they need to reach those milestones. And so just remembering, and this is for me too, just not to put them in a box. Like they don't have to be limited by a disability or by this label. They can have it, but then we can do what we need to do to make sure we move them forward. Whatever that looks like. You know, it won't be the same for everybody, you know, but that's where, yeah, that's where my idea came from, Life Without Limits. Because right now, I think without programs like mine, they are limited. Like I said to you earlier, schools don't carve out time for social interaction, and that'll be more so true with COVID. So where are they supposed to get that piece? Where does that happen? Where they practice how to ask back and forth questions. They get it in therapy with an adult therapist, but does that happen with their peers? Like, when are they supposed to practice that and make it look appropriate for how they interact with their peers?
It's a really good question. It's a really good
Yeah.
thing to reflect on.
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So real quick, Teresa, tell us about what's coming up for you, for your business, anything exciting perhaps that you're working on. I know you mentioned you're trying to revamp your website. Just give me some stuff that you're looking forward to.
Well, right now I am, if I'm being completely honest, I'm trying to figure out this virtual piece. I am not a very technology savvy person, as you saw. So I am trying to brush up my skills on that. I am offering virtual tutoring sessions this semester, this school year. I am offering advocacy via appointment virtually for now. I am partnering with the Sylvester Broom Center to provide some more advocacy pieces and some after-school programs, but we've not fleshed out the details for that just yet. So I don't want to say too much about that just yet. But yeah, we are offering some after-school pieces, some social pieces, thankfully, there. So, and just stay tuned for more information about that. I can share that with you later once we kind of hash it all out.
Excellent. Well, in the meantime, where can we find out about you?
Well, I have an autism support program. Well, it's virtually, and it's a parent group that I have on Facebook. It is a private group, so you have to answer a few questions before you'll be allowed in. Your child must have an IEP in order to get into the group as well. Or you had to have attended one of my classes. So you can attend one of my classes, or your child has an IEP and you're interested in, you know, receiving some advocacy or some pointers for managing behaviors and things like that. So I have that. I also have a Facebook page, and my website should be available soon. So, but I'm working out those technology pieces. This is not fun for me, okay?
We're all being challenged to grow during this time, Teresa, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Ms. Teresa Lucas, Life Without Limits, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the podcast. Remember to support our show so we can keep bringing the most unique content featuring the world's realest entrepreneurs. Go to our website, GigRoots.co, where you can find more episodes, give a donation to the show, and stay up to date with the latest news. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more great content. Right now is the time to celebrate marketplace diversity and to support grassroots economics. We'll see you next time.